Welcome back to the big issue on City TV. My name is Godfred Akotobuafo, also on City 973 on radio, and discussing food prices basically this morning. I've done that for the past hour with Edward Karawe, General Secretary of the General Greek Workers Union, Bismarck Osu Norte, Program Officer, Peasant Farmers Association of Ghana, Nanoche Bedu, who is here with me, Director of Operations for Isoko Ghana. Franklin Kujo is also with us. Then we are going to hear from Anthony Kofi Morrison, who is the CEO of the Chamber of Agribusiness in Ghana. And then just before I break, you are listening to the Member of Parliament for Tamale North, Al-Hassan Suhini, on what he makes of the current state of food security in the country. What can be done to alleviate that? You can also be part of the conversation. Join us via our WhatsApp lines 0549 986 996, 0549 986 996, and 0550 585832, 0550 585832. You can also tweet at us at CityTVGH, hashtag the big issue at City973, also using the same hashtag, or just reach me on at East Sportsman. Godfred Akotobuafo, I'll gladly read that. We're also on YouTube. CITITUBE is a YouTube channel, so you can go there and subscribe and catch a playback. Or you can also stream on Facebook, where we are also live, City TV GH, and then City 973 as well. So catch all that happening. And Honorable, you're making a final point on this, and then we'll hear from Anthony Morrison from the Chamber of Agribusiness.
Right. So the final point I just want to make is that, look, the quality of leadership is revealed in times of crisis. Mm-hmm. It is not only when things are smooth and well that you determine who or what good leadership is. So as a country, we came out with the buffer stock system. What is the role of the buffer stock in this current discussion? Because the aim of setting up an institution like that was for it to play a role in times like this. How have we over the years used buffer stock so that its role is felt today? We have turned it into almost a political institution that stores no food but just award contracts and just engage in things that are unrelated to the reasons why it was set up. You can disagree with it for maybe because of politics or partisanship, but the fact is the reason why we set up buffer stock should have been felt today if we had properly instituted, put it in a proper shape. We have the warehousing system. We went around this country, we constructed warehouses. The Auditor General report revealed the corruption that was even related in the construction of those warehouses, but at least we constructed those warehouses. Some, not fit for purpose, but some, all right. We claim that we overproduce grains. How many have we stored in those warehouses? Okay. So that they can be released to manage prices today. Because, you see, when you have a policy of constructing warehouses, it must be tied to the investment that you are making in production and how you are going to store that overproduction that we are told we got. If indeed we got the overproduction, we should be having a grain stored in these warehouses that will be released onto the market to cushion prices. Clearly, it's just talk, it's just politics, and really nothing went into it. Planting for food and jobs, the experts have also dealt with it and how we have handled it over the years. Apart from the initial grant, a fund that came from the Canadian, government. What we have seen over the years is the usual budgetary increments to the Ministry of Agric. We have not really seen, any effort at mobilizing extra funds to make this program work. Simply, we can commend the government for you doing what all other governments have done in the past, increasing allocations to the Agric Ministry over the years because of this program. But how really have they even used the funds that have been allocated to them is another question that you should be asking yourself. Such that today, fertilizer producers are not able to supply fertilizers because they are owed about 2 years.
Interesting.
These are some of the things that perhaps if we did right locally, we could mitigate against the global, price hikes in food locally.
Thank you very much, Alasan Sahibusu, member of Parliament for Tamale North. Now, Mr. Morrison.
Hi, good morning.
It's been a while. Hope you're good.
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Good to have you back on the big issue. And I guess the question I must ask is, why are your members not protecting us? Because you are the Chamber of Agribusiness, would expect that at least in some of these situations. But when it comes to price, we should also look at perhaps your members sometimes a bit. Should we not? Because some of the prices we are hearing, it looks like you could be accused of profiteering.
Well, that sounds as though it's the case. Very good morning, and a very good morning to my colleagues, Edward Karwe and Peasant Farmers Isoko and Honorable in the studio, and also your cherished viewers. Kojo, let me start with a statement or a report from the Global Agriculture Information Network, which is under the United States Department for Agriculture. This is the world's or global most credible agriculture data. On a report released on April 8th, 2022, it states, which is a forecast on Ghana's agriculture sector. The forecast below: average rainfall, extended dry spells in most parts of Ghana, meteorological agency, looming shortage and soaring global prices of fertilizer, and further cutback on fertilizer subsidies. Rates are set to erode the gain of production in the agriculture sector in Ghana. And this is a document that has cast a lot of doubt on Ghana's agriculture sector. And we also do know the Economic Intelligence Unit also downgraded Ghana's food security index report. But let me tell you the most alarming thing that I think that government needs to wake up. We just returned from the northern region, and it's appearing and is most worrying that over 500,000 farmers in the northern region may not have access to input credit. This is as a result of the companies that are supporting them with input credit have met them and they have reduced their services and they are asking them to produce so that they buy. The reason is that the companies have not been able to raise enough funds from the banks. They are also not being able to secure enough input from the input importers. So they are in a position not to extend any kind of support to these farmers in the northern region. And this is about over 750,000 acres of land that we are talking about. So there is a direct consequences on our food security. There is also a major issue that we have inflicted on ourselves, which is the e-levy. The chamber released a statement last week cautioning government about the fact that the introduction of the e-levy is going to impact on food aggregation. Hey. Currently, 50 kg bag of maize is being sold at 160 Ghana cedis. At the farm gate, you are likely to get it at 130 Ghana cedis. If you are buying 1,000 bags, that means you are going to take at least 150,000 cedis on yourself. Normally, the norm has been that you load it on your Momo, as and when you move and you get the bags of maize, then you pay. As we speak, none of my members or even the aggregators are willing to carry cash. Okay, let me even give you one instance. Last week, 2 people were killed on the Burkina Faso road while going to bring in tomatoes, and they were robbed of their monies. So these are to caution us that, look, the introduction of the e-levy is going to have consequences on availability of food in the city, especially in Accra and Tema. Let's be careful what we bargain for. Then also, our engagement with most farmers. When you produce food as a farmer, you want to sell outright because you need to pay off some of the credits you have received. Then again, the little you keep are only for the sustenance of the family. Maybe you want to sell when your children need school fees, you want to sell when you have to go to hospital, or you want to sell when you have to sort out some pressing needs in their home. Now, most farmers who did maybe 5 acres or 7 acres last year will not be able to do so, because as at the time they sold more than 70% of their produce last year, prices have not doubled. So they have also not made profit accordingly. So what's going to happen is that they will not be able to do the 7 or 5 they did, but they may do 3, only to keep the family's food security moving. And the rest of us in the city thinking that the aggregator will have enough money, the aggregator will be able to aggregate enough foodstuffs and bring it to the city. We should start thinking, because we are living on a very dangerous times. And I'll tell you, the data available to us is increasingly worrying. If we take rice, our rice projected production for this year is going to reduce by some 18%. From 550,000 metric tons, which was done 2021 to 2022. Now the projected reduction will be 450,000 metric tons for 2022 to 2023. So that tells you that Ghana as a country is projected to import over 1 million metric tons of rice.
Where is this calculation coming from?
This is coming from the United States Department for Agriculture. And they monitors all this data. They monitor import globally. And you see, if you take...
No, I'm talking about the reduction in our rice production.
Yes, of course. The reduction in the rice is as a result of the benchmark value that we had challenge with. The higher cost of import globally, there were costs in that area where freight prices went up. Then also the massive depreciation of the cedi was a major. I mean, most people don't look at it and how it impacts on food productivity in the country. Then inflation went up by 90.4%. Then also we have introduced quite a number of taxes at the port, and the transportation costs have gone up, fuel have gone up. For instance, we used to clear an acre around 120, 150. Now it's 220 in some cases if it's closer to the roadside, or 250 if inside you have to drive deeper into the farmlands. So there are major challenges. And last year, the minister refuted this. But you see, I don't know why that gentleman keep complaining where the fact says otherwise. There was prolonged drought. And you see, the fertilizers came late last year. And when the fertilizers came late, the farmers, yes, of course, they got the fertilizer and have to apply the fertilizer. The moment the fertilizers were applied, the rain came down, washed away all the fertilizers. And if you see last year, I mean, I wish I was in the city, I would have showed you pictures. If last year, most of the maize leaves turned from green to yellowish, brownish, when they were not even ready for harvest. Okay, so there was a reduction in terms of the yields per acre. And that also aggravated the total expected food stock that we were supposed to get as a country. Now, if you look at, let me go to corn, which is Ghana's most consumed product. Mm-hmm. Last year, we did 2.5 million metric tons. There'll be a projected decrease this year of 7%. As a result of the access to fertilizer and other inputs, like for instance, glyphosate. Glyphosate used to be sold at 18 cedis. It's now being sold at 52 Ghana cedis. Okay, so now our projected for this year could be heavily impacted as a result of this. Our consumption rate for corn is 2.9 million metric tons. That tells you that corporate institutions should be able to set out some social corporate responsibility and appropriately invest in that. Now, if you take wheat, and for me, it's so alarming when you talk about wheat, because apart from corn, rice, wheat is next. We are doing somewhere around 812,000 metric tons. This year is projected to go up. But this is where the Russia Ukraine war came in. We import over 44% of our wheat from Russia, but 60%, or let me say 52% from Canada. Now, we need to start looking at the local content area for our food and how we bring on board some critical local materials that can support our food production and food processing. We know that we have the orange flesh sweet potato flour. We also have the cassava flour. We also have maize flour. We have soya flour. All this, if you go to Food Research Institute of the CSIR, they have done a lot of research on this. In fact, they have been producing this for various companies with using cassava flour and all that as the base, and they produce cake and other pastries, bread for several years. So I don't know why we can't strategically incorporate this into our eating habits and make it a national policy. So it's becoming an issue that we are not able to strategically take certain sustainable decisions. Then again, if you go to the port duties you have to pay, like the import duty, 5.7, VAT, 15%, ECOWAS levy, 0.5, Export Development Investment Fund, EDIF, 0.5, inspection fee is up. Then you have the National Health Insurance and several others before you get even the handling charges at the port and all that. I think that it's high time we become more strategic in some of these things. But let me say that the Ukraine-Russia war is not the cause of this mess. Globally, this has exposed every country as in how we are prepared with our food security, and for that matter, Africa and Ghana. In our situation in Ghana, even before the Russia war, last year we saw prices jumping from for maize. It was 82 cedis for 50 kg, and it jumped all the way to 120, even before the Russian war. The Russian war only added 20 cedis more as a result of the increase in transportation and also that of fuel. So we are very much exposed. Just as Honorable have also said, we are not making good use of the buffer stock, and for me, it's a major challenge. We have worked tremendously on the ECOWAS food storage policy, and you would have expected that government would have invested into some of these storage facilities, but nothing of that nature is being done. Then we also need to look at what Edward Karere said. What structures are in place when you are importing food exporting food out of this country? For instance, if you go to the northern regions, most of the areas they store some of these grains in the belief that, we are exporting the food out of this country. One instance, we saw that food or maize that were sold in Techima and Wenchi markets, after 7 months, have returned back to the same place to be sold at a higher price. So who gave the permit for these so-called aggregators or exporters to export it out of this country and put it on the borderline, sometimes in clay houses where they keep 1,000 bags and other bags, and only to bring them back in because they are just on the borders of the country? I think that there is a need for us to start maybe look at a national food security committee to aggravated or to prevent some of these exports. If you want to export, you need to apply for permits. You need to also make sure that when you are exporting this product to the destination is known, the purpose, and also, just as we do here in Ghana, if you want to import any product, you need a permit to import it. So you also need to inspect permit coming from other jurisdictions. Okay. But nothing of this nature is done. You only get the way bill from the district, you pay the district some money, and off the products are gone. Nobody watches or in a way monitors
these things. All right. Your point is well made, Anthony Kofi Morrison. So he will end this segment for me. I think he's broken down quite a significant amount of work on what happens there. So we'll keep it here. We'll end this here and try and keep an eye. And this will concern everybody, considering what the stakes are.
So I think the consensus is that, yes, there are global crises, but the local mismanagement has made our situation
You are no longer
worse.
a journalist, Suhini. Stop summarizing.
And unfortunately, it looks like it will get worse.
Yes, it looks like everybody seems to think so. That's why we need to be on the alert and prepare
And that is why
ourselves.
perhaps those in charge, those local managers need to begin to address themselves to some of the suggestions that have come up from
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll discuss education. And an old friend of mine is returning to the show after abandoning me for higher positions. But
since he became
he's back with us as we discuss education.
Since he became
Member of Parliament for Sekendi, Andrew Japamesa, now a deputy minister, returns to the big issue. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the big issue. And I'll be reading messages in a bit just to hear your thoughts on the food crisis or the food concerns that people have with regards to the increasing prices. But now let's talk education, like I said, and then after that we'll also talk politics with the EIU report. So now I have two full members of Parliament on the show. Member of Parliament for Tamale North, Al-Hassan Shaibu Suhini, and the Member of Parliament for Sekendi, Andrew Japamesa.
The first time you had one full member.
Yes, now I have two.
Alfred,
Hey!
you see, you make it look as if
You abandoned us, but it's
I
okay.
haven't. But I've been in the studio at least on 2 occasions.
Since
Joined you via Zoom. I can't remember how many times.
Yes.
Since June of last year. And so it cannot be the case that I've abandoned you. Save that.
He's spinning, don't I?
No, yeah, I know. I mean, I feel very abandoned.
Last time, the best form of defense is to attack. So, when he said that you are not the only one who has been abandoned and went off air, he himself admitted that he is the one who has rather abandoned me.
No. I didn't admit.
Anyway, let me
made
say
no
good
such
morning
admission.
to our cherished viewers and listeners. It's been a while since I came into this building, and it's always good to be here.
And it's also good to have you as
Yeah.
well. We'll also be joined by Kofi Asare via Zoom, Executive Secretary of Education Watch, and Dr. Samuel Atintonu, who's the principal of the Accra College of Education. And that's because we're discussing education in general. There was the KNUST side, but I would prefer to focus heavily on the colleges of education because earlier this week we had Prinkoff, which is the principals of colleges of education, suggest that they were going to wean the schools of colleges of the feeding if government did not pay. Eventually, government came up with some money to make payments. But this development sparked debates for a review of the financing of tertiary and post-secondary education. So some have called for the scrapping of feeding grants and allowances paid teacher trainees. Now, this is a matter that is very, very political. These are campaign matters. And so they are not just matters of policy. These are matters that the two parties the largest parties in this country have campaigned heavily on. They are very, they hold very divergent views on how this particular matter should be handled. And I will just come in and begin this conversation with Suhini on this matter. I think we had this conversation earlier in the course of the week. A lot of people assume, like I was saying, Suhini started off as a journalist, but he started off as a teacher and also as a very vociferous national vice president of the Teacher Trainees Association at the time.
Right.
I think.
Right.
So,
Yes,
he knows a bit about this situation. And I guess I'll begin this from a friend of mine who said, why are we feeding tertiary students?
But Godfred,
Yes,
if you permit me, I mean, I know that I wasn't part of the first discussion. And to be honest and candid, agriculture is not my forte. I'm not too knowledgeable in that space. But of course, we all follow the global events that are unfolding in our very eyes and its impact on us as a nation. Obviously, we are on our own. And so we need to take measures, implement policy that then ensures that the food security of our nation is preserved. But, the suggestion that some mismanagement is as a result of why Ghana is where we are today, as if to say we are some island which obviously if we're doing everything right, we wouldn't be affected by the global situation. And then again, you flip it and you ask whether everybody else is doing something wrong. That is why the individual countries that constitute the global polity is having this situation. It obviously cannot be the case. Okay, so yes, there are issues that then ought to begin to enable us review how we relate with other nations, how we plan our weaning off dependence on if you like, to a large extent, the global environment for our food security. And yes, we have a lot of arable land. Our government can find the resources to invest in agricultural space to ensure that we have some security going forward. But I heard my good friend Alassane say that buffer stock has lost its focus, hence why we are where we are. And I suspect that
just one of the
reasons. I suspect that is because of the support that the Ministry of Education, or the arrangement that the Ministry of Education has gone into with the buffer stock company to, as it were, be the vehicle that is used to supply food for the free SHS program that is informing that suggestion, as if to say that activity is not part of the original focus of buffer stock, but some decision was taken to divert them from merely, if you like, holding stock to meet circumstances where they are shortage. But that obviously is not the case, because I've gone onto the website of the buffer stock company, and clearly a key function that they perform, and if you permit me, I'll read.
Yeah, please.
Okay, say among other functions, NAFCO purchases excess produce of maize, paddy rice, and soya beans from farmers, and then preserves, sells, and distributes these foodstuffs to state institutions. So if they are selling foodstuff to the Ghana Education Service for purposes of the school feeding program, that cannot, by any stretch of the imagination, be suggested to mean buffer stock has departed from their core function. Right. I thought that it was important that I make this point, so we are clear. Okay. We can have a broader conversation on what it is that we do. Yeah, maybe not today, because, like I said, me myself, I'm not a great person.
So we'll leave it there. Let me go on. So why are we feeding tertiary students?
I will not be tempted to go into.
So don't. I will not even allow you again.
I'll answer your question. All I'll just say is that he should convey my apologies to his mom. I was supposed to be there last month to celebrate her 80th birthday, but unfortunately, due to some circumstances, I couldn't be there. But I'm
sure she's watching, so she will hear your apology.
Long life, good health,
thank you on
happy belated birthday to her. So, Prophet, your question about why they are feeding tertiary.
Should we be feeding them?
We shouldn't be feeding them. We shouldn't be feeding them. And yes, earlier this week, I was part of the discussion on the morning show. And I said that we will come to, the realization of what has to be done when the partisanship leave our discourse as far as, education is concerned. And for that matter, that level of education. I was part of students who began the agitation for the colleges of education to be upgraded to tertiary level, tertiary status. Why? Because, Godfred, at the time that I went to the college, the cutoff point, the entry requirement for those colleges were the same for tertiary, institutions. Before that, it was lower. And so the colleges of education awarded what was known as Certificate A to its graduates. But after the Education Review Committee report, where there was a need for, teacher education to be retooled, the recommendation came for the entry requirements to be increased. And so it was pegged at the same level as those who went to polytechnics and those who went to university. And guess what? In the year we went to college, the results that we took, or the entry requirement that was set, if you had that entry requirement and you went to UCC to do basic education, you came out with either a diploma or a degree. But if you went to the College of Education, you came out with a Certificate A. And so we thought that it was unfair. And so our student leaders were tasked by our rank and file to begin the agitations. We didn't succeed in our year, but I recall that when we were handing over, that was a battle cry that we left behind. And subsequently, this call was granted. I recall a meeting with Professor Emil Kumfi in his office when he was Minister of Education with our team. And one of the threats that they used, because we had declared a strike action and all of that, to get us to back down, was to say that if they granted what we were requesting, it was going to mean that we'll be treated like tertiary students. And so we were no longer going to be entitled to allowance, and we're no longer going to be entitled to feeding on campus. But we thought those didn't matter if our certificates were upgraded to give us job security and proper placement in the job market that people may have to depend on for the rest of their lives if they graduated. We thought that was more important than just feeding us and giving us allowance for 3 years. And so we didn't, back down. Now, fast forward, and I'll share with you the recommendation that the Professor Anamansa Committee made on funding teacher education. It says, point 7.5, funding teacher education. The availability of adequate stock of well-trained and committed teachers is a key factor for the success of any educational system. Recognizing this factor, governments tend to support teacher education. In this regard, government pays maintenance allowance to cover boarding and lodging, as well as basic textbooks for the teacher trainings. However, emphasis has been on the training of teachers for the grammar-type school system, and so doing teacher education for TVET subsector has been seriously marginalized. 7.51, recommendations. It is recommended that the cost sharing in teacher education should be as indicated in the table 7.8 below. And in that table, you'll find meals and others being part of the cost that students should bear. Then it says government should continue to pay the allowance for teacher trainees for the time being, but should be reviewed from time to time. Okay. Now, this was a recommendation of the committee in 2004 thereabout under an MPP government. So the structures to wean students of the colleges of education off allowance and off feeding began at that time. And so it was only as a result of partisanship and political expediency that when it came to the implementation, the final lap of the implementation of this policy, you had the kind of, political battles and debates that we had. Today, based on the problems that students on campuses are faced with. Look, this recommendation, these recommendations from the committee led to even the expansion of the training colleges, because at the time, government had a quota, and that quota still exists today because of our inability to, fully implement these recommendations over the years. Government had a quota, and the quota system was given to colleges of education to admit the number of students government could pay allowance to. So even after they upgraded the institutions, increased dormitories, increased classroom blocks, the colleges of education still were not allowed to admit students, so even if they were qualified, because government didn't have the capacity to pay the number of students they could admit. So there's a quota system in place today in the colleges of education.
Underutilization of
of those colleges, underutilization of the colleges. Yet you have classrooms without teachers. Every now and then, government or its agencies or its representatives are commissioning classroom blocks, requiring teachers, the services of teachers. Yet you place a limit, on the number of teachers you can train because of a partisan political reason that you want to maintain something that has outlived its usefulness. Because if you have upgraded the institution to a tertiary status, what it means is that it is unfair for you to be treating this category of tertiary students the way you treat them, giving them allowances. And then when others go to UCC, which is a university, to also learn basic education, they are asked to go for student loan. Are you getting it? You go to training college to learn basic education, to become a teacher, and you are given allowance, you are fed. Then somebody who goes to UCC to also learn basic education to come out to be a teacher and will come out with the same certificate as you who is in the training college is treated differently. So clearly it didn't make sense, and it still doesn't make sense, that we have boxed ourselves with this problem that we are not able to solve, because this government said they were going to pay the allowances on time. As we speak, they are in arrears over 6 months. So if you don't have it, why do you promise it? Especially when lifting it is more progressive and it solves your problems in the educational sector. It gives you the opportunity for the schools to admit more. It gives students the opportunity to get a job, because you see, some people qualify but the schools can't admit them, and so they have no guarantee of becoming teachers. But if you allow the schools to admit, if they were admitting 150 or 200 students, they can admit 300, and the 100 more that may be unemployed or waiting outside will now have a guarantee that in about 3 years or 4 years at least they will be teachers, because there are classrooms that require their services. So keeping the policy doesn't solve your long-term problem, and also it doesn't allow you to even you don't even have the money to pay them in the first place. And if you had the money, it would have allowed you to put the money in other places. But maybe just to wrap up on this,
yes,
if we had if we had addressed the problem the way the experts recommended us to deal with it, and on the basis of what is fair and what is universal, we would have been having a discussion around how to support tertiary education meaningfully in terms of funding. We would not be where we are, where students are told that they will now be fed once a day, their allowances are in arrears, and that is what we are discussing. When, in actual fact, what we should be talking about today, if we had resolved that problem, should be why is the student loan scheme not working the way it should be working? Because as we speak, we are told that for over a year now, the student loan scheme has not, disbursed any funds to students. That should be our discussion. Why is it so? Does it require increased funding? Where are we going to get that funding for the student loan trust, so that every student that requires help, financial help, and goes to the student loan trust fund will not have to wait more than 2 or 3 months before money is disbursed to that student? That should be where we should be with our discussion, so that the schools will run smoothly. You will not have, KNUST students, over 6,000 of them, asked to, defer their programs because the student loan scheme is not working appropriately. But now you are having to, juggle that discussion with this self-inflicted problem that we have because of partisanship, put on ourselves at the colleges of education level.
Hold on for me, Suhini. Let me hear from Dr. Samuel Atintonu, who's the principal at Accra College of Education. Dr. Atintonu, good morning. Thank you for joining us on The Big Issue.
Good morning.
I'm sure you've been following the conversation. And I guess I have just one big question for you. What will be an ideal working arrangement as a principal of a college of education?
I didn't get that.
I was saying, what would be the ideal working arrangement for you with regards to this whole, allowances and feeding grants issue?
Okay. Good morning to you and our cherished listeners, and to the rest of my colleague principals. I'm standing in today for my president, Dr. Yamiche. I think the current arrangement is quite good. That's saying allowance. I've listened to on.
Okay, we seem to be facing challenges with the.
Good morning to you. And the argument in that, if you look at the colleges today, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
All right. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that the Honorable Suhini's submission that today the colleges of education are tertiary institutions, and therefore they cannot have that preferential treatment where they are given allowances, and that of UCC, UW, and other universities that are training teachers are not. And I think the fact is, these are different arrangements, given the background to the fact that he himself came up through the teacher training colleges then, and then now the colleges of education. I think if we're looking at this issue, we should try to look at it in the context of which the training colleges are, and not to necessarily align them to the universities. And let me tell you one thing. Yes, if you go to UCC, they are doing basic education, which is aimed at training them to teach at a basic level. But from 2018-2019, the curriculum of that of the colleges of education had seen a massive reform in which we have tried to go beyond just basic education training, but making sure that these specializations are targeted at different levels of teaching at the basic level. For example, you have the early grade teacher training program, which trains somebody precisely and to make sure the teacher is equipped effectively to handle early grades. You also have the second one, which is training a primary school teacher to teach effectively at the primary school level. And then the JHS, that's the one that has specialization and somehow aligned to the basic education programs in the university. But the question, coming back to your substantive question, what would be the ideal arrangement for me as a principal and therefore all my other colleagues? I should think that the ideal one, yes, the allowances, the way it is being paid, quite good. It really helps a number of the students that come to the colleges. I can assure you what happened to Kenya yesterday, and I just saw that this morning, that some form of amnesty has been granted to the students to continue. Those things exist in the colleges of education, where students seriously rely on the allowances to make sure they even save it to pay their school fees. And the feeding component actually helps the students to also pursue their program. The challenge that we have is exactly the recent thing that we experience as principals, where there is a delay in the payment of the allowances and the feeding grant to us. And we try to negotiate with the suppliers, but that gets out because anybody who gives a credit line will have some deadline. It cannot be an open-ended one. So the ideal situation would be, at least we would expect that component of the feeding grant to get it on time in order to make sure we feed the students. The ideal situation will also be that the allowance as it is, it started some time ago, which was 400 cities, 200 going to the students, and then 200 coming to the colleges for the feeding of the students. Indeed, it is actually 60 pesos per day per student for 3 good square meals. And where we are, you can understand that that's where the principals are having a challenge. So the ideal situation would be to look at these things vis-a-vis the current situation that we have in the real market term, because it is clear where we have been battling with this for the past 2-3 years that the initial amount for the feeding grant is no longer helping us to do what we can do to support the students. But I would not say that where we are, he quoted the annual moments report.
Yeah,
it was actually 2008. Yes, Professor Mohammed, that was a reform, a major reform that happened in 2008. And yes, there were some recommendations in there where they still agreed and submitted that we should allow the allowances to be. Of course, Brinkoff or even the students themselves are not saying we're not open to a new conversation as to how we can move forward if we're beginning to have challenges to support. What are the other ones? But we will not, at this point, again, still say that let's remove the allowance because we don't have money. Let's remove the allowance because we're in a tertiary education now level. The colleges of education are different. And I would want to actually also make a point here about the admission tied to a quota. It is not exactly the situation. What happens in the colleges now is that when we decided in 2018, 2019 to increase the 3-year diploma to a 4-year bachelor degree program, what it meant was that initially, when the students were getting to the 3rd year, they moved out of the college space to stay and do what is called teaching practice outside the college campus, which means you have only level 100 and 200 staying on campus. Since the 4th year, this is the first time we have now gotten the full stretch of level 400 in place. That presented a challenge because almost all the 46 colleges of education do not actually have the capacity in terms of facility, hostel facility, to house these students. So we have had to find some other innovative ways which some would be online, others would be on campus, and then they can go and others will come. We did that when the COVID came very effectively. At the moment, we have another arrangement where 2 badges at a time would be around, and then the other ones would also come in. Nonetheless, within the colleges themselves, what we have realized with the infrastructure problem, the challenge that we are having is that the vote from get funds to the colleges is actually very, very small. It is not enough. So if you compare it to what the universities get, where they can build big facilities using the get funds, our vote is actually small. And the problem arises because in the get form allocation formula, it is tied to the number of students that you have. Now, if Accra College, you have just barely about 1,400 students compared to Tech or Eugene, where they are talking about 40,000, 60,000, you can understand the context in which my vote would be too small to be used to develop any infrastructure. So basically, it will call for a renegotiation, a revising this formula to say that the colleges are emerging tertiary institutions, and therefore, let us see them in a manner that will put resources to improve their infrastructure. Another point that indeed they are admitting, every year we try to get the statistics of from Ghana Education Service, how many of these basic teachers do you really need? Recall that I said we have a training program for Bachelor of Education for early grade, a training program for Bachelor of Education primary school, Bachelor of Education for GHS. What is exactly happening now is that there appears to be over-concentration of the teachers at the junior high level, leaving the primary and the early grade where the gaps are. So, point then is, yes, even if we open up the quota to say, okay, let us admit as much as we want. Since it is only our students who are absorbed by government, we are also bound in a way to make sure whatever we produce fits into their vacancy basket or slot. So that's the problem about that one. It is not entirely about the allowances vis-a-vis the admission. So these are the issues I would want, and the ideal ones that I presented.
Let me ask this. You talk about being able to do certain things and being, perhaps numbers would help in that regard.
Yeah.
Would the removal of the quota system help in that regard?
Yeah, that's why I said it is not actually a quota system. For example, in Accra College last year, we have as much as almost I think we got almost 6,000 applying to come in. But basically, our infrastructure in there cannot pull up more than 400 or 350. Do you see where the situation is? What I did, and the colleges were the only institutions where admissions are done from a centralized point. What it means is that if you buy a crack, you go online and purchase a form to go to the College of Education. It is only one, but you can choose a crack college as first choice. Second choice may be a Kokere. Second choice may be Zambai College. Now, with the 6,000 that apply to come to Accra College, assuming I could manage only 400, I'll pick my 400. But the system allows you to move the students around to where there are deep cities. So I have done that, and other colleges have also done students to ND College. I've moved students to Peki where their numbers were not up. So it allows you to balance and make sure where the vacancy exists in other sister colleges, they are moved to. So that's how you deal with the situation.
All right.
So it is about infrastructure, that's the hostel facilities that are restricted or limited on the campuses.
All right, thank you, Dr. Atintonu. Kofi Asare, I'm sure you've listened to Dr. Atintonu. He's a principal and seems to be fairly okay with the current system if only disbursements are made on time. He's fine.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning to all my colleague panelists and Doctor Atintonu, my very good friend. I mean, it won't come as a surprise. Every College of Education head will be happy to see the college, the teacher training allowance regime stay, because who doesn't like to procure? They procure. Let's be honest. So it will be difficult to find one principal of a college who will not be in favor of maintaining a policy that gives them some procurement power. But let's go. Let's look at the fundamental issues here. We are discussing an issue relating to spending efficiency. Broadly, all we are discussing is about how we use resources we have, bearing in mind that we are not an exception to the rule of scarcity, and indeed, we have severe liquidity issues in this country. In 2001, Africa Development Bank's Economic Outlook Report for Africa made a particular finding. And the AFDB said that Africa was contributing the highest in terms of GDP to education after the European Union. So in terms of the continental contribution of resources to education, Africa was number 2 after the European Union. But when it came to spending efficiency, we were the last continent. And we're not only the last continent, but the gap between Africa and South America, which was the last of one continent, was about 20 percentage points. We were around 49, and they were around 68. It tells you how spending efficiency is our problem. So His Excellency the President will go to the UK as he did last year, the Education Summit, and make pronouncements that actually depict government's commitment to education. We are spending about 20%, 22% of our public expenditure on education. It is true. But what are you spending the money on? Spending efficiency. Now, one area that we have been spending efficient, the reason we are committing the second highest in terms of GDP to education, but we have the highest out-of-school children in the world. And we have the highest level of illiteracy, the highest level of post-primary illiteracy, the highest level of dropouts, etc., and the lowest level of learning outcomes, is because social interventions, social policies implemented to deliver education, in many instances, are not efficiently implemented. And that is why. So this discussion we are having is a discussion on another social policy, which is also not being efficiently implemented. And when you implement social policies inefficiently, it means that the opportunity cost becomes high for other things that could have been done should the policy have seen efficient implementation. Now, One key principle in social policy implementation is the principle of equity and non-discrimination. Every good social policy must not discriminate. The second is that it must target, as much as practicable, target the beneficiaries so that the poorest of the poor who are marginalized economically, get the opportunity of benefiting fully from the policy. Now, let's run this policy through these two key principles or canons of every social policy. The teacher training allowance policy is not a targeted policy. It is premised on the fact that we are providing stipend and food for teachers and bonding them so that when they complete, we'll post them to rural areas where they will go and teach because they have been bonded. That's all we are told as the key driver, according to the Ministry of Education. But it makes sense to expect that you want to incentivize teachers to accept postings to deprived parts of the country where regular teachers will not admit or will not accept postings to. But look at the approach. The approach is that you are going to disburse this money, about 3,200 cedis every year, to over 50,000 teachers to spend the money over a 3-year period or a 4-year period. And these teachers who are going to benefit include teachers who are students at Accra College of Education who are going to be posted to Medina and Adenta to teach, knowing very well Adenta and Medina are not deprived districts. So you haven't targeted the policy, hence spending inefficiency. The second is non-discrimination. Is this policy non-discriminating? Is this policy an epitome of a non-discriminative policy, or is it equitable? No. The policy is simply saying that even though there are teachers learning the same basic education at UCC, in Winneba, and UDS, etc., who all eventually find themselves teaching in Ghanaian classrooms, we are only going to give this money to the few who are in colleges of education that are also tertiary institutions. So you are all tertiary students, but I'll give you a preferential treatment. It has nothing to do with non-discrimination. It is discriminatory, and for that matter, you find that the policy has severe deficits. The third thing that makes it even more discriminatory is that aligned to this policy is also a guarantee that immediately you complete school, government will absorb you. There's a guarantee. There's a guarantee of ready job. So the preferential absorption of students who attend colleges of education to do beyond basic education is another symptom of discrimination in this whole business of the way we are managing our social policies within the college of education space. So from all angles, the only objective this particular policy keeps serving is political, and that is why it becomes difficult to discuss it, contextually, because the only reason is political. Now, I think that this is the way forward. I know we don't have enough time. I think this is the way forward. The first is that we are discussing an issue relating to cost of tertiary education and how government can help in reducing the cost barriers. If that is the case, we need to look at it holistically for every tertiary student, including the engineer, including the doctor, and the teacher, because they are all people who provide essential services to the Republic, especially the doctor. The first is that we need to have a much more realistic loan scheme. Our student loan scheme is not realistic in the sense that it gives an average of 2,500 cedis as student loan to students, including those who are doing pharmacy, for instance, fee paying, who are paying 7,000 cedis a year. So obviously the student is not able to even pay the fees, not even half for some students. And so if you want to have a financing mechanism where government is comfortable that we are helping you to pay your fees so that when you complete school, you pay back, give them at least what is required to pay their fees. If you not give them what is enough to take care of their stipend, give them enough to pay what is required to cover their full fees. So we need a responsive and realistic student loan scheme. The one we have is tokenistic. It doesn't have any correlation with the real cost of tertiary education, at least the direct cost that they pay to the university. The second is that we need to have a guarantee system within our student loan system. And listen very well, this is different from the guarantor system. A guarantee system in our student loan scheme It's one that will enable Kofi Asare walk to University of Ghana and tell them that I have applied for a student loan. I have gone through the means testing. I qualify for student loan, but it hasn't been disbursed. It will delay because of the way we appropriate at the student loan. So, on the basis of this student loan award letter, it is a guarantee against my loan. If I owe fees of 5,000, I deposit the letter. Whenever the loan arrives, student loan trust fund will pay the university directly. There is no way any student will be taken through what some students are being taken through at KMSC because they applied for student loan 2 years ago. Last year, they didn't have the opportunity of applying for student loan. They have not received student loan this year, and so they cannot remain in school. So a guarantee system is important so that it can, at least in the medium term, offset the impact of the delayed disbursement of student loan. As we speak now, the student loan has been in arrears for years. Those who went to level 100 last year in January haven't received their student loan. Those who went to level 100 this year haven't received their student loan. And there are students who are in level 300 who are still expecting backlogs from last 2 years because Get Fund is now a virtual dried lagoon. Get Fund is not pumping money into the student loan scheme. Indeed, last year, the student loan trust fund was actually running on 40% repayment. Nothing came from Get Fund. And so we need to, and I'm moving to the last point. In doing these two things, we need to strengthen Get Fund. We need to revise Get Fund. We need to take Get Fund off the earmarked capping fund, the earmarked fund capping law, which the Ministry of Finance passed in 2018, which has capped Get Fund at 25%. We need to win Get Fund off the capping so that we can have some funding released for other things, including the student loan. The second thing is that we have an opportunity to amend the student loan trust fund law. Per now, the law mandates that I think a minimum of 2% of the Get Fund should be paid to support the student loan trust fund. That 2% is a drop in the bucket. It has proven not to be effective because the repayment loan, the repayment rate on the student loan trust fund is only 40%. So they will require at least 10% of the Get Fund. 10% of the Get Fund to support a well-functioning student loan scheme. We need to amend the student loan law and then increase the threshold to a minimum of 10%, so that the student loan trust fund will not only rely on repayments they receive every month, then they will pay small. When they receive 2 CDs, then they pay small. No. Let's have these two things done. Now, when we have done that, then we re-engineer the application process for the Get Fund. And then the appropriation process. Presently, after the minister reads the budget, it goes to appropriation. By the time Get Fund is allocated, we are already in March. And even if the disbursement will be made, okay, that's even if the disbursement will be made, we are already in March. Students are already in school for a semester. Semester is ending. Students need the money to even pay the admission fee. So what can we do? We can have a situation where you can apply for a student loan in anticipation of admission. You can use your WASI results to apply. Once you apply to the university, you apply for the student loan. They start processing your documents. When the admission letter is ready, you send it to the student secretariat, and then they validate it. That's all. So we can have a much more. We can push back the appropriation process so that in this year's budget we can have allocation for Get Fund for 2 years. You understand? So that we don't have to wait every year, wait for 3, 4 months, 5 months before appropriation process is done and then disbursement made. If we don't re-engineer the feeder into the student loan trust fund, it will be difficult for Get Fund for the fund to disburse loans promptly to students. I think if we are able to do this, every student, whether archaeology, medicine, or engineering, will have adequate funding to fund their tertiary education, and government will not have any business going around buying food for adult learners who are in tertiary institutions.
Thank you very much, Kofi Asare. Let me hear from Andre Japan-Mensah on this one. He's been making copious notes.
A lot.
Yes, you must have a lot to say on this matter. Let me hear your thoughts.
Perspectives that have been shared. Starting with comments from my brother, who clearly seems to be, to a large extent, in sync with what Kofi has just said. That then clearly is at variance with what the principal of the College of Education.
Yeah, the Accra College of Education.
Also said. So it's obvious to all of us that there's really no consensus, especially when it comes to the colleges of education and the allowances and or feeding that is made available to them. I get a sense that, of course, from Kofi's presentation, that the principals are only speaking with respect to the current arrangement and their support for it is purely because of the procurement opportunity that system affords them. I don't think that would be the only consideration that they would have, and so, for example, if you're talking of, as Suhini alleges, which clearly from the comments that were made by the principal, that in itself is not entirely accurate, that there's some underutilization, of infrastructure. And indeed, if you look at the chairman of the PRINCOF, the statement that he made when he said that the colleges of education were special institutions, because the structure of their infrastructure itself, the dormitory system that they run, as opposed to the halls of residence that the universities, and of course, I mean, if they've been elevated to the status of universities, then maybe the infrastructure that then makes it a full university ought to be put in. That costs money. You have a situation where Kofi alluded to the fiscal, the cash flow challenges that we have as a nation. And so the question is whether government can even afford to put up halls of residence or a college of education merely because people are advocating for payment of loans as opposed to providing feeding for them as the current arrangement seem to support. And so I think that, by and large, these are matters that have been with us for a long time. The talk of the Anamwa Mensah recommendation and the NPP administration, which set that committee up, under President Kufuor's era, then turning around, if you like. It will be interesting to see whether a white paper was issued that then endorsed those recommendations that have been made. Because it's only at that point that you can suggest that your government issued a white paper supporting those specific recommendations that then said move away from allowances and feeding and go into students' loan. Why are you then now making a U-turn to say that that recommendation and the white paper that you issued endorsing those recommendations are not going to be adhered to? I haven't seen it, and so it's important for them who are saying that that arrangement was started, because clearly a recommendation doesn't necessarily mean that it's been accepted by government. And so to that extent, I don't think that there's any real basis to suggest a turnaround. This is a policy that the NPP government rolled out, clearly believing, of course, based on representations that the segment of the students had made, to the effect that, look, and of course, there's a reason why trainee colleges were provided meals and allowances as opposed to taking them off the students' loan scheme. When I was in university in the 90s, we were taking loans, but trainees were paid allowances because of the specific needs of the country in terms of our educational and nursing, manpower. So a policy decision was taken to incentivize, if you like, those who went through that system. And I even have a challenge with respect to the suggestion that merely by reason of the fact that they are all tertiary institutions, necessarily ought to be given the same treatment. I fail to see how that can hold, because depending on the manpower needs or some other reason that the state may have, you can put in specific policy that then discriminates positively, in terms of tertiary education, training, and the kinds of facilities and or benefits that you give to people who may enter into those institutions. So, but then again, I mean, Kofi threw out all sorts of recommendations on way forward. And I think that, yes, taking out the politicking may be good, may obviously be the best way to go. And so we can begin to have a conversation on building consensus as to what it is that ought to stay. People ought to move away from myopic positions, dug in positions that, look, we are not in favor of this position, okay, merely because that's what government is pushing, and to put in suggestions, meaningful ones, that then helps to build a better system that is geared towards building the kind of system that we want for our tertiary level. On the students' loan front, that is surprising to me, that no disbursements.
Yeah, but they have been lacking.
Yes, they may be delays.
Significant delays.
Well, because why I say it's surprising is that every year when the formula of the GET fund is approved by Parliament, there's a component of the inflows to GET fund that goes to Students' Loan Trust Fund for purposes of disbursing to students. So unless, of course, the suggestion is that those funds do not get to GET fund. Okay, and yes, there's been some suggestion that the securitization of a portion, okay, of the GET fund proceeds to improve and increase the senior secondary school infrastructure, which Parliament approved $1.5 billion. Okay, as far as I'm aware, only $500,000 was actually or has been disbursed as of now. That then leaves significant inflows to the GET fund to enable them meet the other obligations that they have.
But they are not.
Well, we need to interrogate that. I do not have the evidence to suggest that they are not meeting
but the evidence
all the obligations.
The lacks are fact, Honorable Mensah. It is not assumption. The disbursements have not been going.
Of course, Kofi himself admitted, and he says that, well, those are from repayments. I'm not in a position to confirm or deny that. So let's look at it. And if it's not going, let's find out why it is not going. On the guarantee system that he suggested, I think it's a good idea. That needs to be looked at as part of the reform that general public is advocating, experts are advocating the review of the law. I know that the education minister indicated a couple of days ago that the no guarantor, okay, policy that we in the MPP said we're going to introduce, that then inhibited people accessing the facility in the first place. Because, Godfred, I don't know when you were in university, the difficulty at the time, there was even 3 guarantors that you needed.
Yes.
Okay, of people who had contributed for a certain number of minimum number of years. And it was a real hell going around spending precious man hours that you could have stayed in the classroom, attending lectures, going around looking for guarantors. Okay, so taking away that requirement in itself is a useful one, but yes, there are necessary reforms that ought to go in to ensure that the system is improved to provide the requisite services for our students, especially those who are going through the tertiary system, and all those ought to be considered going forward to move the system forward.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Ejapa Mensah. I'll take a quick break. When I return, we will discuss this.
Maybe before the break, if you just permit me to.
I cannot.
Please, I cannot. Maybe 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes.
I don't have 2 minutes.
Just 2 minutes, please.
Honorable Senior, I beg you, I don't have 2 minutes.
Okay, so 1 minute, please.
If I give you 1 minute, I have to give.
No, I don't think that I'll generate. I don't think I'll generate any controversy that will require his intervention, except to say that there's indeed a government white paper. I was trying to find it on my way here. I remember I referred to it when we had the discussion this week, and the government white paper also indicated that there was a need for us to look at reviewing the payment of allowances to the students in the colleges of education per the recommendation of the committee. But I just want to reiterate a point that Kofi made that I don't feel very comfortable making. But we have to put that into context when we are having this discussion. And that's why I'm saying that when the partisanship and perhaps the group or self-interest, leave the discussion, we'll begin to rationally approach a decision that can better serve the educational needs of this country. Look, the principal, I've forgotten his name.
Dr. Tinton.
Dr. Tinton. I mean, he makes the point that the colleges of education are different from the universities, but they are tertiary educations. Yes, indeed, polytechnics are different from universities, but they are tertiary institutions. You don't expect them to be the same. But the fact that they are tertiary institutions, we should begin to have a conversation of how to treat, our tertiary, education fairly. And I agree with him also that it will be important to maintain the allowances if they will come on time, and if government, if it will not affect other, areas requiring investment in education. I mean, if we had enough as a country, that would have been the ideal. If we had enough, and so that every month we can pay the students on time, I will support it, so that students don't have to expect it and rather get paid 6 or 7 months later. Okay. I'll support it. But that is why the discussion around the student loan scheme, which I think Kofi Asare did beautifully, is what is important. We admit that students who go to the colleges of education, and for that matter, students who go to all our training institutions, tertiary training institutions, whether polytechnic, university, or colleges of education, need assistance. We have majority of them coming from backgrounds that cannot support the cost of the education that they are seeking. But the way to address it is not to single out those in one level of tertiary education and pretend to be giving them allowances that we don't even have for them, and pretend to be feeding them with amounts of money that we cannot release for them to be fed. When we can actually retool the student loan scheme and advocate for its proper funding and its proper usage, so that those who really need that support can get the appropriate support there. Like he says, if you apply to school and your parents cannot afford, and then you apply to the Get Fund at the, what do you call it? Student loan scheme at the same time. And then there is a process that will ensure that by the time you get admission, Student Loan Trust Fund is releasing the money to the school that gives you admission. Who is going to be concerned about allowances? So let's address the root cause of the problem and stop this, I understand. Pedestrian.
Perfectly well. Thank you very much, Member of Parliament for Tamale North, Al-Hassan Saibusini. I'll take a quick break. When I come back, we'll look at this 5-year forecast of Ghana from the Economic Intelligence Unit. Both political parties in this country pick and choose when they like the EIU. This week, both of them don't like the EIU. So we will look at what the EIU...
I don't think we said we don't like EIUs.
We've heard...
Is their interpretation of what you say?
We've heard some of the things your leadership has said about the assumptions of the EIU, and we'll take it from there. So when we return, the EIU is next. They say there's the possibility of a change in government, but under certain conditions, and that is where both sides say, well, we have questions. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the big issue as we enter the final leg, and we'll be discussing a bit of politics. Like I said, the EIU report came out this week, 5-year forecast, and it discusses a lot of things. It discusses international relations, international economic assumptions, looks at policy trends, makes an economic forecast summary, fiscal policy. It's an interesting report, and it comes out quite regularly. Like I said, both our political parties are big fans of the EIU as and when it suits them. But this week, the attention was drawn to a very small paragraph, Election Watch, and very early on in the election calendar. But we are 2 years from the election or 3 years from the election? We are 2 years from the election, but the forecast says, and I'm just going to read this quickly. What they said was that the next parliamentary and presidential elections are due in 2024. under constitutionally mandated term limits, the incumbent president, Mr. Akufo-Addo, cannot run for a third term. The former president, John Mahama, is reportedly considering running again. But we expect the opposition NDC to try to revitalize its prospects with a fresh candidate. Our baseline forecast is that ongoing public disaffection with the slow pace of improvements in governance, such as infrastructure development, job creation, and easing of corruption, will trigger anti-incumbency factors and push the electorate to seek a change. The NDC therefore stands a reasonable chance of winning the 2024 elections. So these are the assumptions that have been made with the forecast that has been made by the Economic Intelligence Unit. And I've brought in my good friend who does his own polling as well. Musa Dankwa, Executive Director of Global Info Analytics, always does interesting surveys so that we can just do a bit of juxtaposition on this. Your thoughts on the forecast, first of all, Musa?
I think from what you've seen in the data, there's nothing to support that conclusion that it has to be someone else before NDC can win.
From your side?
Yes, from the data we saw.
Okay.
But in January, remember we did some survey in January.
Yes.
And we did match-up of John Mahama against the other frontrunners in MPP.
Okay.
And we did the next NDC candidate, which Dufo, against the same competitors. Whilst John Mahama was beating the MPP candidates, Dufo was losing against them.
Okay.
So on the basis of that data we've seen, I don't know, maybe NDC will bring another candidate from heaven where we haven't seen before, which we haven't tested. But from what we have seen from the data, there's no supporting evidence of that.
That Mahama is the strongest candidate that the NDC could put out.
It even shows when we did analysis of who do you best trust to manage some 4 core election issues, where we asked voters to tell us who they trust to manage the economy, education, job creation, and infrastructure. And in all those four key components of people's concern, Mahama stands tall against all of them.
Okay.
So people are trusting him to deal with their top issues.
Okay.
Invariably, if you give them the chance to vote, not all of them, but most will vote for him.
You don't get any hint of there being a feel for a revitalization of the prospects of the NDC?
No. At the moment, even within the NDC family, Mahama is winning hands down. And across broader voters, it's still winning hands down.
Okay.
So I can't see where these guys are getting their information from.
Well, that's yes. Let me just talk to Franklin.
It's interesting how one poster is questioning the basis of another poster's conclusions.
No, they didn't do poll. No, they didn't do poll.
They are doing analysis.
They do analysis.
No. Let's focus on this one.
You did convenience sampling.
You calm down.
They did what? I want to know. I'm not a statistician.
Yeah, but he is. You calm down. You calm down.
I just want to understand.
You will understand soon. Don't worry. He will understand soon. He'll tell you what he did. Okay. Franklin, let me talk to you. Yes, you are an avid follower of the EIU and their forecast. What conclusions did you make based on these very short paragraphs that they put together? Early forecasts that they have made that the former president John Mahama is reportedly considering running again, which we all know, but there's an expectation that the NDC might try to revitalize its prospects with a fresh candidate. It's interesting language, and you being a person who deals in these things, you know that these reports don't choose their words lightly. And then also talks about the NDC standing a reasonable chance of winning the 2024 election and ongoing public dissatisfaction with a slow pace of improvements in governance, such as infrastructure development, job creation, and easing of corruption and whatnot.
I think these reviews or indeed expectations are welcome in our political environment, and so I cannot necessarily fault anyone who undertakes some research in order to, as it were, forecast what might happen in the next election. The only challenge I have with that moniker that suggests that if the NDC stands a good chance but they might revitalize their efforts or boost their efforts if they change the candidates. It's I think it's a bit confusing because in one breath the suggestion is that the reasons why the NDC might be preferred over the current party, over the current governing party, is because of A, B, C, D, and they've given about 4 reasons.
Yes.
Make political, of course, they mentioned the issues of corruption and what have you, which tells me that depending on, it probably wouldn't even matter which candidate might be fronted, right?
Exactly.
Get that relationship.
And so if you then proceed from there and say that, well, maybe John Mahama has some deficits, maybe it could be taken in good faith, because what it means that John might then, assuming John is the the candidate leading right now, according to my other good friend in the studio.
Yeah, Musa.
Then it only means that the JM camp would intensify their efforts in order to, as it were, mop up any excess doubts, really. That's the only interpretation I can put to this. But I must also add that, well, like they say in politics, a year is a long time in politics. And there could be all kinds of surprises along the way. And so I don't think the NDC should rest on its OS. It is important to recognize that the ruling government realizes, and I think my good friend in Japan would make that concession as well, that there are significant challenges, which is a tone that generally is now welcome. I don't think they've been too haughty about the challenges now, which means that they may also be working towards, as it were, changing the fortunes or the narrative that has dogged the economy. And so all I'm saying is that each camp should be very wary and is going to really get to the issues of the day. I mean, if the economy turns around, then there could be challenges for the opposition party as well. So there's a lot of things that might change. But I certainly think that the two polls are very, very important to watch, and both parties must be wary of where they may think they are actually solid, and do some work on them. I mean, at the end of the day, what Ghanaians require are essentials of life, really. If anybody is able to show and demonstrate that they can overturn the current fortunes, the current challenges we have, which are quite enormous, by the way, I must add. I mean, in spite of all the global headwinds and what have you, there's still some room for the ruling government to do a lot more. I certainly think that they could have deepened the cuts, done a lot more rationalization, and while we aren't seeing that they should be judicious in the use of the resources that we make, and they should also be a bit accommodating on very important matters like the e-levy and what have you, because eventually these are the things people can relate to, not the high, big language, big grammar about economic stability. It ought to be felt in the pockets. And so once they can pull a magic wand somewhere between now and 2024, they obviously stand a chance. All I'm trying to say is that nobody should feel too comfortable by the polls that are before us right now.
Okay, so thank you, Franklin, and let me come to the man who perhaps on this program will speak for the government. Baseline forecast says things are not going well, and this could trigger anti-incumbency factors and push the electorate to seek a change. I've heard from your party's director of communications, for instance, who says, yes, we have heard what you have said. We respect your track record, but we also have our focus on breaking a cycle that normally would be that would be the norm. are you worried in any way?
Well, let me say good morning to my very good friend Franklin. I was going to chastise him that he didn't recognize me, but subsequently during his presentation, he said that I was here. And of course, Doc, right?
No, he's Mr.
Busa. Very, very, very well. You see, I shared the sentiments that were expressed by my good friend Franklin, largely. Safe to add that to the extent that nobody should feel comfortable with respect to the forecast, or if you like, the sampling survey that Mr. Busa has done. I don't think that anybody should feel daunted as well, and especially speaking from where I sit and reflecting the position that was ably articulated by the communications director of our party. Yes, we are not daunted at all, because you see, I think that the good people of this country are rational, they are reasonable, they appreciate the issues. Indeed, the economic managers of our economy, when the NDC were in office, the IMF, which everybody, or especially the NDC, is calling on government to resort to and not raise additional revenue, has spoken only on the 19th of April. And this is the Forbes report where the IMF sounds alarm on significant slowdown as Ukraine war and inflation slam global economies. These are matters of fact. That if you look at the performance of the economy of this country, yes, it had challenges, no doubt. 2017 to 2019, the financial sector cleanup and all the energy sector payments that were made had significant impact on our economy and our ability to grow the economy to the levels that we would have desired. But if you look at the numbers, the performance was good.
Okay.
Everybody in this country could sense the sense of a Ghana that was on the path of recovery and growth. Then COVID hit. That then compounded our problem. No doubt. Then 2021, we see a slight improvement in our GDP growth. Indeed, the figures that were released by the Statistical Service only this week shows a growth of 5.4%. Okay? Then we begin 2022, of course, issues about the passage of the budget, the e-levy and all that, the confidence, of course, the downgrading of our economy and the impact that they had with investor confidence and people pulling out their resource and its effect on the exchange rate. These are matters of fact. Then Ukraine-Russia conflict also hits us. That has led to the kind of projection that the IMF is projecting. The global economy, of which Ghana is an integral part. And so I say that the Ghanaian electorate are reasonable, they are rational. The propaganda you throw out there notwithstanding, everybody recognizes that if you back out all these external impact that has affected our economy and assess the NPP pre the emergence of all these issues and relate that performance of the NPP over that period with that of the NDC, where no shocks essentially occasioned our economy, you make an assessment to determine who is a better manager of the economy, and the issues for me are clear. Okay, so yes, interesting observation by the EIU. Like I said, the conditions that they indicated in there, I underlined, such as infrastructure development, job creation, and easing of corruption. Okay, what it means is that if Ghanaians clearly see that all the infrastructure projects that are at various stages of completion, pre-2024 general elections, most of them are completed and they are seeing them. The hospitals, the roads, the schools, the water systems that we sit in parliament and approve facilities for that to the extent that they haven't been completed, you cannot say you are finished. Okay? Just like they started University of Ghana medical facility in 2011, that it took them up to 2016 that they didn't complete, that the MPP had to even come and increase funding to get it done. Clearly, it tells that these infrastructure projects take time to complete. And so when Ghanaians begin to see the rollout of all the things that the government is, and look, I say this without any apology whatsoever, because you and I sit in parliament. Mr. Mahama told us when a GBC reporter interviewed him that it is the duty of the media to go to parliament and ascertain what the loans that he has contracted are used for. Because every single loan that he contracts, the constitution enjoins him to take it to parliament for approval. Why? Has it changed? Those constitutional provisions have changed under this government. It hasn't. So I'm saying that when Ghanaians begin, and of course I admit that many of the projects that government is doing have not been completed. Only recently we saw the Tamale interchange being commissioned. When did it start? It took time. Eastern Regional Hospital, they're working there. Several other places. So I'm saying that when the infrastructure development question is settled by 2024,
everything will be clear.
No issue. When the youth start kicks in actively to complement NAPE and all the other interventions that government is doing, when the one district, one factory projects that are intended on recruiting people who have gone through the NAPCO and all those initiatives, many more factories are completed and the job creation issues reduce. Obviously, there won't be any issues. When the anti-corruption institutions, such as the special prosecutor, is seen to be doing his work actively and holding people to account, these questions will be addressed. So and I'm positive that by 2024, the economy would have turned around. Absolutely. Unless, of course, some extraordinary issue unknown to all of us, occasions that then impacts our economy in such a manner that is beyond salvation. These matters will be dealt with, and the good people of this country will do the needful and assess the performance of both governments. No doubt at all. Except that it's not going to be easy. Nobody would kid himself that is going to be the election 2024 is going to be won on the silver platter. It will require a lot of work. It will require a lot of information. It will require a lot of education for people to appreciate those, especially those who do not appreciate the impact of all the things that are happening around the world that is impacting Ghana, to understand that this is where we are and draw the lines clearly for them to see where we are and to decide which government to trust going forward in managing the affairs of this country. So
EIU says, per their forecast, their baseline forecast, they expect their reports, the former president is expected to run, but there's an expectation that the party that you belong to will try to revitalize its prospects with a fresh candidate. And the NPP itself, in responding through the communications director, basically says they cannot wait if it is former President Mahama, because they are very happy to put their track record against his as a candidate. But do you get a sense that there's a need to revitalize the prospects of the NDC?
I'll come to that, but I find some interesting, sentences in the report.
On the election watch paragraph?
I'll get there. If you look at page 5. Page 5. It says that the last sentence, in November 2021, the minority government, my interest is government. I didn't know we had a minority government in this country, but it says the minority government rejected the proposed 2022 budget bill over the introduction of an electronic levy. Now, for me, this is a matter of history and it's a matter of record. I mean,
let's not get this wrong.
It's not even about that one. That is minor. I mean, the minority government is minor. My thing about record and fact is that some people still think that the NPP under President Akufo-Addo did not have its budget, rejected. Just like Dr. Liman, it's become the second government to have had its budget rejected. Okay. And then the report continues to say that later it was reversed and the 2022 budget bill was passed. So it tells you that, for the records, after Liman, Nana Akufo-Addo goes down in history as one of the presidents that also got his budget rejected. Now, if you look at the election watch,
yes,
you see, let's take the sentence that refers to former President Mahama. And it says, the former President John Mahama is reportedly considering running again.
Yes.
But we expect the opposition NDC to try to revitalize its prospects with a fresh candidate. It's not, their expectation is, we are not told if their expectation is backed by any data or any research. It's just their expectation. Do you understand? They are making a point that they expect him to run again. And they also expect the NDC to change him. For what they didn't say, why they haven't said.
To revitalize
why they haven't
prospects.
Said beyond to revitalize the prospects. Now, as to how that translates into meaning, that if John Mahama runs, the NDC will not win. When they have actually gone ahead from that sentence to say that our baseline forecast, now they are speaking about forecast. They are not speaking about their feelings or their expectations. They are not speaking about forecast. That their baseline forecast is that ongoing public disaffection with a slow pace of improvements in governance, such as infrastructure development, which has nothing to do with John Mahama. In fact, based on Mr. Dankwe's report, if you talk about infrastructure, the people trust John Mahama to provide infrastructure more than any possible candidate for the 2024 general elections. Job creation and easing of corruption and all of that will trigger anti-incumbency factors and push the electorate to seek change. The electorates, we are told, by their baseline forecast, is no longer, they have gone out of the realm of their expectations and their feelings. They are not talking about their baseline forecast, yes. That the people will want change. And that the NDC therefore stands a reasonable chance of winning the 2024 elections. So for them, I mean, what they think, what they expect, really is not even measured by their baseline forecast. That's why it is separated from the baseline forecast. Otherwise, they would have told you that by our baseline forecast, the NDC base can be, or the NDC chances, or it's can be revitalized if they change on Mahama. But they are not speaking in terms of their baseline forecast when they talk about a possible change of John Mahama. So for us in the NDC, it's okay for anybody to think that the NDC, I mean, should change, you know, our candidate. It's okay for anybody to think that. But if it is not backed by data, why should we care? It's not backed by any forecast. It's not backed by any, it's just a mere expectation. Okay. Yes, so they should have that mere expectation. But
the forecast itself.
But the forecast itself is interesting. The forecast tells us that we stand a chance of winning because of the things that they have enumerated. And I agree with all those who say that, look, a year is long enough time, in politics. So as things stand now, for us, it is just, you know, a good information for us to begin to couch our campaign in such a way that we will provide solutions to these problems that are seen to be the reasons why the people will want a change. We need to carve solutions, a message that will provide solutions to these problems, because
or situations that might not be problems again if you are to believe what Honorable Mesa is saying.
I mean, the country will always have infrastructure needs. Do you understand? We will. Job creation is always going to be an issue in this country for a long time to come now. Corruption is a major problem today. You know, especially when you have a leader who cannot seem to sanction anybody in his government. And so everybody is going wayward. It's going to continue, you know, anytime soon. He doesn't seem to even care about what is happening under his watch. But I'm surprised
Okay.
I'm surprised that
because I wanted to ask Musa about some insights.
My brother still, makes reference to the external forces affecting the economy and all of that. Look, Dr. Bawumia says you should stop that. He says that he agrees with those who say that our economy and the challenges that our economy, is faced with, doesn't have much to do with some of these external forces that you repeatedly, make references to. He agrees with those who say that you should stop those references. And he identified three problems. He talked about excess capacity charges. He talks about, the banking sector cleanup. And he talked about, COVID. Even though he did not tell us that COVID itself brought us a lot of goodies, but he told us that of these three challenges, COVID is the least, because he said that we are dealing with a 50 billion problem as far as these three issues are concerned. And that is what has ballooned our debt, and we are having all these crises. Now, COVID's contribution to this 50 billion challenge is the least, according to him. And so, our problems are self-inflicted. The banking sector cleanup is self-inflicted. It was not the solution that was used, was not the only solution available, but it was the most costly. It has proven to be the most costly. Again, excess capacity charges, they have not been able to even tell us. The minister is here if he can. How much excess capacity have we generated? It's okay. We've about this. I'm saying that he must stop that argument, because Dr. Bawumia advises them to stop that and look at the self-inflicted problems.
Are you sure?
Hold on. Oh, yes, let me hear.
He agrees with those who say that it is not external. It's not solely external.
What other insights did you pick up from this recent round of dipstick that you did?
In a nutshell, limiting our analysis to the 68 constituencies that we went to. We haven't said, or we haven't tried to generalize it across the country. I think we should get it clear. We said this report is based on 68 constituencies that we interviewed. So the analysis must be limited to those 68 constituencies. And this is what we found. Generally, within the MPP race, Alan is ahead nationally among every voter. But within the intra-party, among MPP affiliates, Bawumia is ahead 10 points, 46-36%, within voters who said they are MPP in the survey, which means that within MPP, Bawumia is ahead by 10 percentage points. But when you look at the broader voters, which include NDC, MPP, everybody, then Alan is ahead by just 3 percentage points. And we have time. Now, what we also saw in the data is that regardless of which candidate MPP puts against John Mahama, if he's the candidate, Mahama is still winning. This was the narrative in the January poll, and again being repeated in April. The difference is that in all those instances, Alan fares better in terms of the margin between him and Mahama than Bawumia against Mahama.
Interesting.
Yes, because the race between Bawumia and Mahama is about 23% point gap, and Alan is about 13%. So that is overall in terms of the politics part of the survey.
And you see what I've seen interesting with the poll too is that I went through it. No, I went through it. I mean, last night I was just reading it before I went to bed. It's the approval rating of the president. I mean, compared to January and this year, it's dropped.
There's been a drop, yeah.
The popularity of Dr. Bawumia compared to January and this year has dropped. Same with Alan. But interestingly, the approval rating of Mahama, is on the ascendancy. And that's why I'm saying that if anyone is entitled to feel that the NDC should change, its candidate. But we know what is good for the party and, by extension, for this country.
Well, I don't have too much time, so I'll wrap this up. The big issue today. Honorable Mesa, your time is up. It's okay.
It's all right.
We'll discuss the rest back door. No, thank you for joining us. What am I asking?
No, because I hear him say 68 constituencies, and then in his next sentence he says nationally.
No, he
Since
said
they,
no,
no, you said nationally.
They say they are not applying it nationally. That's what he said.
I was paying very close attention to the comment that he made. So if he agrees that 68 constituencies is not representative of the nation,
he's already issued that disclaimer. He's already issued that disclaimer. Thank you very much as well.
4,000.
My name is Godfrey Akutuba. Thank you very much to Franklin Kujo.
More than 200
because it's not pleasant to...
No, not at all.
The returning Ejapa Mesa didn't invite me to his mother's birthday party. Have a good weekend.